And it is a great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Francine Gordon. Francine has been a superb supporter of women in Silicon Valley for decades. She was one of the first female professors in business at Stanford, which is a part of Silicon Valley Forum. She's very, very active in promoting women in technology. She's a consultant, she's a facilitator. She runs a lot of workshops for corporations and nonprofits. She also teaches at Santa Clara University, where she teaches organizational behavior and something else. You have to get me on that one, Francine.
It is organizational behavior, but different classes within that.
Yeah, let me just pin my video so I know I'm here. And she worked for the Boston Consulting Group, and she has written a lot of articles about women and innovation. And we were talking about this topic because she recently presented the imposter syndrome. So for those of you who have never heard of it, or like me, I never heard of it until quite recently, it is a psychological phenomenon where people don't acknowledge their own accomplishments. So she would tell us a little bit more about that. She also gave us a scale. So I did mine. It's right here. And I was very surprised by that. So she's going to explain to us what it meant. And I have a series of questions that we're going to discuss, and then we're going to open up some questions that some people have asked me already. So I'm going to start with Francine, asking her what it is and how she got into this, she got involved into this.
Imposter syndrome is basically the feeling that somebody's going to find out I'm not as competent or as smart, or that somehow I'm not as good as other people think I am. So I know I'm really not that competent. Everybody else thinks I am. Somebody may find out. I feel I'm in danger, that I will be exposed, so to speak. And it's actually very prevalent among people who are very accomplished. So in some ways, it's almost ironic. People who suffer from it most are often the people who are actually extremely competent and do well, but every time they do well, they discount it because they feel like, for example, I worked so hard in order to get that project done. If I were really competent, I wouldn't have had to work that hard.
Oh, I see.
So that becomes part of it. The reason I got involved is because it's been an issue for me. And I mean, I have wonderful credentials. I always say when I see myself on paper, I'm very impressed. I've got the PhD from Yale, and I've taught at Stanford, et cetera. And yet there are times I truly have felt like an imposter. And so anybody who specializes in psychological, social psychology type topics, and then says, oh, I study this because I have no connection, it's strictly academic, usually there's some connection. Either it's something that bothers them or a significant other in their life, a child, a parent, whatever. In my case, it's something that I have suffered from, and I have a lot of friends who have suffered from it. So I took the approach that I know, which is to intellectualize it and get more information.
That is fantastic. So nothing like having something meaning, having a personal meaning to really get into it, right?
Yes,
and
exactly.
Why is that important? How does show up? How does it show up in other people? And why would that be important?
It shows up in many ways. One of the biggest costs is passing up really great opportunities. And I know I've done this, where an opportunity comes along, for example, to take a particular position or to get involved, maybe start a company or invest in something. And I feel like, well, I have no expertise. So somebody's come along and said, here's an opportunity for you to pursue. And the feeling of an imposter leads you to think, I better not do it. I haven't done it before. I don't know that I'll have the ability to do it. Just because I did something similar doesn't mean I will do well in this case. it also shows up, and there's a book that talks about a gentleman who was extremely successful in his given company and was offered a promotion based on his past success. And he was so concerned that it would not be able to duplicate the success he had that he quit the company. Because his feeling was, oh, I had this great success, but I'm really not that good. And now they'll put me in another job and they'll think I will do really well, but I'm going to fail. So I'll just leave. It's another price that you pay. So you have people who are not taking advantage of opportunities. And in terms of a company, it's really bad because the people that have the ability to do some challenging jobs aren't stepping up to the plate for fear that they won't be able to accomplish what's necessary.
So let me ask you, when you talk about that, let me ask you for clarification, how is this different from fear of failure or fear of success, actually? How is this related to that at all or not?
It really is in many ways. The fear of failure is part of it. What's a little different is the feeling that the reason I'm afraid of failing is because I've done well before. And people expect me to continue doing well. I don't think I can replicate my past success. So there's already been some kind of track record established, and yet you discount it. And it's always based on other things. Well, I just happened to be at the right place. It was an assignment that had my particular skill set, but that will never happen again. I had the right team. So you'll get a lot of that. And so there's a way of explaining away past success. And if you look at it as externally, all those factors made me successful. What are the odds all those factors will help me again be successful? It's not going to happen. So the reason, so fear of failure is definitely a part of it, but it's not the only part.
Then when you talk about the fear of failure and success and the imposter syndrome, it makes me think about something that we study a lot in entrepreneurship, and that is called the internal locus of control. How is it related to, what is the internal locus of control, and how is that related to it?
Internal locus of control is saying, I am responsible for what happens, that the things that I accomplish are based on what I am able to do. And it also means I start off with the assumption that I control my environment, not other people, not other factors. External locus of control is more accepting that my success is colored by other people in part, as well as by circumstances. So it puts you in a more of almost a victim mentality because you don't feel you have complete control. So I don't know that research has specifically tied the two, but I would say by definition, when you look at what the imposter syndrome is, it clearly is related because it's saying my success is not because of my internal capability, it's the world around me that will dictate whether I'm successful or not.
And let me just jump then into how do you evaluate the imposter syndrome? What are the things that you evaluate? Because I know how we evaluate the internal locus of control. You basically just start asking people what is responsible for your outcome, not for your success, but for the outcome of your activities. And the internal locus of control, people who have a high internal locus of control believe that their attitude and their actions are the great influencers in the outcome of their actions. And I know how we evaluate that, but I don't know how we evaluate the imposter syndrome. And you sent us a questionnaire. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that questionnaire and what are the things mean.
So the questionnaire was developed by Pauline Rose Clance, she was the woman who created the term imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome. So she coined it originally. Ironically, there were several books that were written in the 60s and early 70s, and then they all went out of print. And now I think they're coming back because people are talking about it again. she had discovered that she herself felt like an imposter. She felt like everybody knows something I don't know, and clearly everybody is smarter than I am.
And I'm really found out. I don't want to be there. They're going to know.
Exactly. And so she actually created this. This is a slight variation on the form that she created to assess whether someone is suffering from the imposter syndrome or not. And there's no magic cutoff number. It just gives you an idea. And the 3 subtypes, which I purposely did not indicate what they were. I figured that would generate a little interest. Good for marketing, right?
These are right here. Oh, I can't see that. Well, hold on a second. Because let me just put it there. I did my work. So I don't know if you can say, I did my work. I was surprised to some of the answers there. And for those of you who got the link, this is a document. It's on the web. And these are the 3 areas that Francine is going to talk about.
Right.
Okay, so
the first one is doubt owns success. That's DOS.
Okay.
That is, I was successful, but it wasn't because of me.
Okay.
And it shows up in many ways. For example, you have headed up a successful project, and somebody says, "That was a wonderful project, Alicia. I really want to commend you." And it really wasn't me, it was the team. I was there, but I had a great team, and my boss really supported me. And it's all about everybody and everything. It's not about me. Very hard to accept true, honest compliments. So that's one dynamic. It's the I don't own my success. I doubt it. I don't own it. So it can be, you can think of it either way. The next one, NGE, never good enough.
I'm so in there.
That's the perfectionist component. And I know we've talked about doing another session on it because that clearly ties into this. That is, I know I did a good job. If I only had another week, it would have been so much better. It's really not good enough.
That's fascinating. I wish I could blame my parents, because I think a lot of people just blame their parents. You know, A was not good enough. You need to have A+, but you know, at this age, I can't keep blaming them. I have to take ownership for that.
Oh, no, you can still blame them. There's no age limit.
Oh my goodness. Well, you know, I can't blame them because my kids are going to blame me. But the never good enough, I have very high numbers there. Yeah.
And I'm not surprised. It's
embarrassing.
Workshops on overcoming perfectionism. That's definitely something I suffer from. And I'm much better now. I make mistakes, and I do not assume if I make a mistake that the world will come to an end or I will die. Never was quite that extreme, but I've been able to let go of some of the perfectionism. So if I make a mistake, it's like, okay, I made a mistake, I'll fix it. It's not like a doctor going into surgery makes a mistake and the patient dies. Most mistakes I'm likely to make are not going to result in anyone being physically harmed in any way. But it took me a long time to get there. And I think it takes a lot of people to get to a point where you can say, I did a really good job. There's an image of what perfect is. It probably doesn't exist, or if it exists, it's so rare, it's not worth the extra 90% of the work you put into it to get up there. And so you wind up doing a lot of work without really accomplishing a lot more, and it becomes an energy drain.
Yes, that's I can tell you all the times that I've done that. My dad used to tell me when I first presented my research papers, I was a kid. And my dad used to tell me, don't work that hard. People don't know how good you, and I'm like, I can be better. And he's like, people don't know and people don't care. And it was so interesting. Yeah.
That's very internally driven. So you say, I own my standards. I just can never live up to them, which is why I know I'm not good enough. Why I'm not, I'm an imposter. So that's that dynamic. And the third one is pretty good front. I know I look successful. I know people think I'm doing well. I get it. I'm really good at coming across as confident. I know I'm not really that way. And I'll give you a funny example. There's something called Singularity University, which you know about. I don't know if people elsewhere will know, but It's an organization that's very futuristic. They have Ray Kurzweil, who talks about the continuum, the singularity between computers and mankind, and Peter Diamandis, who is the person behind the Google X Prize that led to the first space vehicle, the Spaceship One. They organize this university, as they call it. And they do a panel once a year on women in the singularity. And I was on the panel. And to give you, I don't remember all the other panelists, but one was a woman who was the first woman fighter pilot in the US Air Force. And not only was she the first woman fighter pilot, she didn't really make the height requirement.
Oh.
Which is, so it had an added dimension. They said, oh, she's not tall enough. And she went through this whole big thing about why her height would not be a deterrent in her being an effective fighter pilot. So that here we are, we're sitting next to each other, and I'm going, I am so in awe of you. And she turned around, she said, oh, that's nothing compared to what you did. And then all the other women, we all started talking about, well, we really are not that important. We're really not that about pretending. It was literally this sense of, you look at the other person and you say, I'm really, compared to them, I mean, I'm nothing like them. I really am an imposter. I know I look like I've got it together, but I know that's not really the truth.
Yeah, that is.
And that's the pretty good stuff.
That is fascinating. I can't count the number of times where I've been in places where I feel I just don't belong here. These are people that are way beyond everything I could ever imagine. I don't, it's like, wow, I don't know what I'm doing here. How could they look up at me? And I don't know. Do you think that's a female thing? Because I used to think that had to do with being Latin American or being small, because I'm a small person. But is that a female thing, or what has been the research? What has been shown, and why people don't feel that they are
good enough?
They're not good enough.
They're not equal to the other people. I'm looking very confident, but I'm not. There's some situations where it's very likely to come up regardless. So if you are the first minority in a given organization, so everybody is white and you are the first Black person, mm-hmm. or go into Asia, everybody's Asian and you're the first white, or you're the first Hispanic in an organization where they haven't had any before. Mm-hmm. Just because you are different in terms of that factor, which is, it's a demographic, it's a fact of life. The very fact that you're different will make you feel like, I don't belong here. Okay. It's hard not to. So in Silicon Valley, given that it's very male oriented, you hear a lot of women say, I'm a woman engineer. I don't feel like I belong here because I'm different from the other people around me. And that's a common sensation. And I'd say, and the research says 70% of people feel that at some point in their lives. So it might be a man walking into an all-women's organization feeling like, I don't fit, I don't belong, they're taking me because they need a token man, and it's be that kind of a feeling. So part of it is being different. And yes, in your case, you might say, now I'm in the US, I'm Latin American. Height might be an issue. So it could be any factor that would trigger it. I think women might be a little bit more susceptible to it because women tend to be a little bit more susceptible to perfectionism. So again, you have that, I have a standard that's way up here, and I come up to here and I feel like because I'm only here, I'm less than, and I'm not entitled and I shouldn't, so I think women have it a little bit more often, but men definitely do experience it.
That's so interesting. So I think we've covered some of the basics, how it is expressed. We have the questionnaire. We talk about how people realize that. But, I'm a very action-driven person. And I want to talk about the solution or the management. How do we manage that? And I want to ask you two questions amongst the many others that I have. But now I want to ask you, first is, what can we do to help ourselves? And after that, what can we do to help somebody? Because we've been in situations where we've seen that somebody else is very qualified, very capable, and they don't step up, and then we start questioning them. So those are the two questions. How do we help ourselves, and then how do we help somebody else who might be feeling the imposter syndrome?
Good question. And I would say the two, they're really the same in many ways. What you would do for yourself is what you would do for somebody else. Because one of the things I would say is, if you're feeling that way, first thing you need to do is be able to talk about it. Some people are ashamed of it. If I tell anybody I feel like an imposter, anybody knows about it, it'll be a disaster. So hopefully you have a good friend, be it at work or at home, or somebody that you trust enough to say, this is how I feel. Help me, help me understand how you see me, and give me some feedback, because there's what you feel versus the reality of what's going on, and there's a disconnect. So you may go through, I did this, and these were all the factors, and it wasn't me. And somebody on the outside says, let me tell you what I see. Realistically, these are the facts. And it takes an outsider to really get you to listen. You know the facts, but you discount them. You need somebody that you trust who would also tell you if there were circumstances that were luck, and there's always luck. Very few people succeed in the world without some luck. That's just a fact of life. But if you say everything is responsible for luck, you're nowhere. So you want to have somebody you can confide in, which means if there's somebody who works for you, you may want to raise the issue in case they're not likely to come up and say. It's very unlikely an employee would say, I feel like an imposter, for all the reasons we talked about. Well, you'll think less of me, etc. But the person doesn't take a position to ask, why is it that you feel that you can't take this position? And if the person says, I'm not good enough, that at that point you can give them data. This is what you've done that nobody else could do. So there are things like that that you can do to help somebody else, be it a friend or an employee. And you don't have to necessarily have them use the words, I'm an imposter, but to say, I know it's likely that you don't truly own it. I've noticed you don't accept compliments very well. You're always quick to turn them down. I suspect you don't own your success. Let me tell you what I see. And as a manager, you can also make a point of saying, and I know you're capable of learning what you need as you go forward.
Okay.
So that would be one thing that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is to listen to the self-talk. Now, this is more for yourself. Usually, as an imposter, you spend a lot of time telling yourself in your head, this little voice, oh, I'm not good enough. This is not going to work. It was a fluke, etc. One way to deal with it is to become very mindful of what you say to yourself. Self-talk is extremely powerful. And one way to deal with it is to literally give yourself a reminder, put a rubber band around your wrist or something like that. And when you start to do it, snap it. Do something that will, I know it sounds funny, but it's that physical, bringing it to your attention repeatedly. I'm doing it again. I'm doing it again. Because otherwise it becomes, you need to change the habit. It's a lifelong habit. You've been having this conversation in your head your whole life. So what you need to do is to change the conversation. And a big way to do it is literally snap yourself out of it.
So this is a question that I thought was really, really interesting from the audience that was sent yesterday. I have a coworker that takes all the credit for the work that I do. Is he an imposter, or am I the imposter?
It's a very interesting question. It's hard to tell if the other person is an imposter or not. There are some people who, because they are insecure and may feel like an imposter or question their own ability, will take credit because they need to build themselves up. Other people happen to be power seekers, for lack of a better word, who are perfectly happy to take credit for anybody else's work. So it's very hard to tell. I would say, to the extent that the individual asking the question knows that he or she has done a good job, it would be helpful not in maybe to pull the person aside and say, when we do this, it's a team effort, and I would appreciate, being acknowledged for what I do. Or if it comes up in a meeting and somebody's, he says, I did so and so, to say, we did this, it was a team effort. But I would go to the person first and give him a chance to he may not even realize he's doing it. I don't know. But I would not say that you're an imposter. It just means that whoever it is has his own issue. And I'm saying his because she said it was a he.
Yeah, yeah. They said
It sounds like he's got issues, and whether it's because he wants the power and he feels a need to build himself up, or whether it's a question of he's insecure or has imposter syndrome, that's hard to tell. But you are not the imposter.
That's pretty good. Here's another one that is somehow related. Sometimes I feel I'm cheating. Does that make me an imposter? And I think you cover some of that, but I just want to acknowledge some of the questions that have come.
The feeling I'm cheating is because I'm being successful in spite of myself, and it's because I was lucky enough. It's usually something like I was lucky enough to be in the right position, which is not cheating. And that is another component I should point out. People who suffer from the imposter syndrome have the misperception that other people who do well don't work hard, it comes easily to them, and they do it on their own. And those are all misperceptions. If in order to succeed, you need to ask for help, that doesn't make you less than, and asking for help is not cheating. By the same token, if you have to work hard, don't assume that somebody else wouldn't have to work hard also, but that becomes part of the cycle. I'm working really hard, that's why I got through this, but somebody else wouldn't have had to work so hard. That's part of the imposter syndrome. And so it makes you feel like the fact that you have to work so hard is bad. I'm cheating, I had to do twice as much work than somebody else did, and that's not right, but I did it so I could do a good job. That's not cheating. That's just holding yourself to a standard and expecting things that are unrealistic. And it's a very persistent misperception.
That's great. There's another question. Is there anything I can do as a parent to help my children not feel this way? And I'm assuming they're small children, because my children are grown up, so I'm done with them, I hope.
It's beyond hope. They're going to blame you regardless.
I know.
I would say there are a couple of things. One is, and there's more and more information coming out, that you should not focus on rewarding children for good performance, but on good effort. Very often now, in fact, there's a whole culture. I don't know how prevalent it is outside the US, but now there's this praise culture. You show up at a game, you get a reward for showing up. It's like, for participation, we want to make you feel so self-confident, we'll reward you for everything. That's really not very constructive. What's important is that children learn that they should try. And if they try and something doesn't work, it's very important that they learn that something not working isn't a failure, it's a learning experience. And that's something that I know I was not raised that failure has anything good to come out of it. But it's something that if children get comfortable having mistakes, they can get much more comfortable having mistakes as adults. And you have to consciously work at it. I heard an interview with Elizabeth Holmes, who she's the youngest self-made billionaire in the world. She started a company called Theranos. I think she's now all of 32 or 33. And in an interview that they did with her, she said when she was growing up, every night her father would ask both her and her brother, what did you fail at, or what did not go well today? And she said her father was grooming them to learn that they should try things. And if it didn't work out, as long as they learned from it, that was wonderful. What a mindset to have, as opposed to, you did a great job, you get rewarded. And so spending time helping your children understand that putting in a good effort, and if something doesn't work out, learning from it, puts them in a learning mindset. And that kind of mindset is critical, as opposed to you're good, you're bad, you're smart, you're not smart. A whole other area of research is the whole Dweck stuff on what they call mindset, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And you can help your child develop a growth mindset. What I don't know today, I'll learn tomorrow. If I make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. I've learned something, I won't make the same mistake. So I think that's very important. And if the child starts having any questions about his or her competence, or whether or not they are an imposter, or everybody else is doing better, to let the child feel comfortable talking about it and saying, hey, we all feel like that sometime. Probably the other people feel that way too. They just don't want to talk about it with each other.
Oh, that's good. So having some empathy for the way other people feel, it's also very important.
Yeah, because we look at the outside. It's like, there's been a lot of talk about Facebook. Most people don't post bad things on Facebook. It's all the good things that happen to them. So people look at it and they say, everybody has a perfect life. They're having great vacations, and they're having these promotions, and they're having kids, and nobody's writing about, I had a fight with my spouse, or I broke up with most of them are not going to write about that. So you're getting a very sanitized view of the world. And I think a lot of people look at it, compare themselves to that, and feel like they're failures in comparison. In point of fact, it's not a realistic view of who the other people are.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. I also think some cultures have a tendency to talk more about problems than about solutions. And there's what I call the victim mentality and the hero mentality. The Americans tend to like heroes, the people that stood up and to overcome any difficulties. And in some other cultures, it's about the people who are stoic, and they're, they get beaten, but they are resilient, but they still get beaten. They don't win. They're just resilient. And there's some other cultures where you can't beat the system, so you just give up, but you do talk and talk and talk and talk about the problems. I don't know if that leads to feeling an imposter or no, but I do know that some people, when they move countries to a country where innovation, failure, and just exploration is praised and welcome, like the U.S., some of these people have a hard time because they don't know how to reconcile with their upbringing. I don't know if you have any suggestions. We're getting into innovation and learning and trying, but I think it would be very important because many of the people that are watching here are not in the U.S. and they're not in Silicon Valley, which is,
it's a subculture of the U.S. This is certainly not all the U.S. This is a very rarefied atmosphere, for better or for worse. Resilience is a very important word. I think it's key to anybody's success, is being able to bounce back, because everybody has bad days. Everybody has bad things happen to them. Everybody. It's a question of how do you respond? And so resilience is the most important thing. And again, if something bad happens, so you come to, you're not in Silicon Valley, you have a failure, what you need to do is have people who can say to you, what did you learn? I mean, that's a big part of it, how you look at it. Mm-hmm. And so most people say, I made a mistake, this didn't work out. This company that I tried, I made this investment and it failed. I tried to start this company, it didn't work, I'm a failure. No. All right, you made a bad investment. What could you have done to avoid that? What will you not do again? What was the learning? What caused the problems? Same with a company. You started a company. What did you do right? What should you have done differently so that the next time you've learned from it? And so it's more likely to happen here automatically, but if you're in another environment, find somebody who you can talk to who will support you. And hopefully maybe the people who are involved in this course can be supportive of each other. And so if it happens, just say, hey, I need to talk to somebody else. I mean, I'm hoping that people will stay in touch, because connections, relationships, that is so important in just surviving and dealing with the ups and downs. Nobody does it alone. Really, nobody does it alone.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. Let me ask you another question here. I found this particularly interesting because it touches a button in me. How can I be kinder to myself without becoming mediocre?
Great questions. These are wonderful questions. Not easy, but wonderful.
Well, I don't know if somebody else wants to jump in from the audience. That's also a possibility.
One of the things to do is think of yourself and how you would treat a friend. It's not about don't hold yourself to high standards. It's about don't beat yourself up when you're not perfect. And so if you treat yourself the way you would treat a close friend, that would be a good model. Realistically, if you're someone who cares about performance, you are not going to become mediocre. You're not likely to suddenly say, I don't care. You just might have a little less anxiety in your life. One of the cycles that comes up when people have really high standards and when they suffer from perfectionists and over the imposter syndrome, you get an assignment, you freak out. Oh God, I can't do it. You really worry about it. You worry about it so much you might procrastinate. I know I've done that. You kind of go, like I say, I'm much better than I used to be. I'm still not perfect and I still have my issues. So there'll be times I'll kind of go, oh, this is so challenging. I'm so afraid I won't be able to do a good enough job. So I'll keep going and gathering information, which is one of my ways of dealing with it. More research, more research. And at some point you have to say to yourself, as I said to myself, you got to get this done. At which point you have less time left now and you're under a time pressure in addition to whatever it is. And then of course, what would normally happen is you get the work done and you say, oh, I did it, but it's because I worked so hard, I can't do that again, or somebody else wouldn't have had to. So it's be kind to yourself, accept the fact that you're human. Nobody can work 24/7. There's so much research on the importance of sleep, on the importance of vacation, on the importance of getting away from the grind, because if you keep at it all the time, you're going to wear yourself out. And say, okay, build in time for breaks. Build in time to reward yourself when you've done something well. Don't worry about being mediocre. It's not likely to happen.
You know, I just got this chat message from one of the participants that I don't know who that person is, because it goes under admin, so it could be any person. It says, great advice. Sometimes I have to be more friendly with myself when I make mistakes. I think that's a great advice.
It is, and I mean, it's easier said than done, but just think of it. How would you treat your child or a dear friend? You wouldn't beat them up. So practice those things. Maybe you have a little card that you keep near your computer or wherever you work, so if something doesn't work out, those are the questions you ask yourself as opposed to beating yourself up.
How can I talk to my supervisor about the imposter syndrome?
How do you talk to your supervisor? Depending on your relationship. So that's obviously a big variable. If you are offered a situation, or if you're doing well, you should ask for feedback on what's working and what's not working. I'd say to treat it, if you're not really comfortable with your supervisor, probably the best thing to do is ask for, what things am I doing really well? What things should I stop doing? What things would you recommend that I do differently? And listen. And if there's a question like you have concerns about your ability in a particular area, I managed a big project, I'm worried about, do you think I'm really a good project manager? You can approach it from that direction and say, this last project was really challenging. I'm really glad it turned out well, assuming you've had the feedback. I'm curious, what did I do well? What could I do differently so that I'd be eligible for the next position? And if you're offered a position that you are uncertain about, you can talk to your manager and express concern about, I really want to take this. I am concerned that I don't have this particular skill. What would be the best way for me to develop it? And also find people who either know you at work or at home who can give you the reinforcement that you need to say why they think you're capable of doing it. And again, growth mindset. Most people who are successful take positions that they do not have all the skills. Otherwise, you can't go forward. You'll only do what you've done before. So in order to move forward, whether it be into a new business venture, into taking a different role as an investor versus being an entrepreneur, if it's taking a promotion within a company, there's always going to be things that are going to be new. The question is, how can you develop the skills on the fly? And that could be just on the job training. It can be taking a class. It can be asking someone to mentor you for that particular job.
These last comments make me think a lot about entrepreneurs that we see that are seeking capital. On many occasions, or most occasions, they've never raised capital before. And they feel that they are not in the same position as the investor. When in reality, if they're looking for capital from angel investors, the angel investors are likely to have been in that position before. So they can really help. And they could probably understand them a little bit better than the venture capitalists because they've been there. So they probably can mentor them in a better way. I think it would be very interesting to have a conversation about how do you overcome feeling an imposter when you're looking for funds. And that's why I actually invited you, Francine, here, because sometimes you don't have clear lines of direction. Sometimes, like a lot of people are contacting us and saying, how do I do this with my boss? But how would you deal with this when you are in an unstructured environment? You have your own company, you're trying to create something that is new or disruptive. Probably you're trying to create something that nobody in your family created before. And you talk about the importance of having a good community and having data. Is there a checklist or something that people can look at?
Do their due diligence and find out who the angel investors are and whether or not they've been entrepreneurs. They may want to go to angel investors for whom they are not asking money and get their advice and say, did you ever deal with this, etc. You see that someone's been through it, they have been an entrepreneur, they got money, and this is not someone you're going to ask for money, but to say, listen, I know I'm really good at this, this is what concerns me, how did you do it? Again, you don't have to come up with all the answers. Other people have been through this and other people can mentor you through it.
Really, what can I do differently will be more clear for her to let me know what can I do better, no?
Yes.
Yes.
And it's constructive and it's asking for constructive feedback.
Yes, a constructive feedback, yes.
You did a good job, you did a good bad. It's always fair to say, if I can do something better, tell me how, because I want to learn.
Yeah.
And I can learn based on you. You can basically be coaching me. You can help me because you have information and knowledge and experience. I can help me get better at this.
Yeah, it's a clear question. Yes. Great.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you all for participating. Thank you so much, Francine, for being here. And as usual, I will leave you to say the last words.
You have to remember that what you see is the outside persona of any other individual. The imposter syndrome is an internal state. You know about it. How you look externally is different. Michelle Pfeiffer, the actress, Kate Winslet, these are two very well-known actresses who have won Academy Awards. They feel like imposters. They don't look like it. They've talked about it. So know that you're not alone. Don't listen to the inner voice that keeps telling you that you're wrong and you're less than. Look at the data, seek support, and know you really are as good as everybody thinks you are.